I didn't know it at the time, but the drive home that Friday night was the last moment I still believed my family was waiting for me with pride. I had no idea that by the end of the weekend, I would understand exactly where I stood and how little my years of sacrifice had ever meant to them. 3 days earlier, I had passed the California bar. The email arrived at 6:12 a.m. I remember the time because my hands were shaking so badly, I had to sit on the floor of my tiny apartment in Sacramento, my back pressed against the fridge that hummed louder than my thoughts. I reread the word pass again and again, convinced my eyes were lying to me. For years, my life had been reduced to fluorescent library lights, stale coffee, instant noodles, and a constant, low-grade panic that I might fail and never escape this version of myself. I cried for exactly 8 minutes. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears of relief. Then, I slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, my first thought was simple. I need to tell my parents. I imagined my mother's voice softening for once. Imagined my father saying he was proud of me. I imagined being seen. I didn't even get the chance to dial. My phone buzzed first. "Come home this weekend," my mother texted. "We have a surprise for you." A surprise for me. The timing felt perfect. Too perfect. I took it as a sign. After everything I had endured, after years of being the responsible one, the invisible one, this was finally my moment. I packed my one decent blazer, cleaned out my car, and drove west with a knot of hope tightening in my chest. My parents' house sits on the edge of Monterey Bay, the kind of address people casually name-drop at dinner parties. As I pulled off the highway and followed the familiar winding road toward the water, I told myself not to expect too much, but I couldn't stop imagining a banner with my name on it. A toast, a hug, something I should have known better. Before I even reached the house, I saw the cars. Mercedes, Teslas, a black Range Rover parked halfway up the gravel driveway. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a small family surprise. This was an event. As I stepped out of my car, the sound hit me next. Music. Not a playlist. Live music. A jazz trio playing softly somewhere near the backyard. Warm string lights were wrapped around the old cypress trees, glowing against the darkening sky. There was a white tent set up on the lawn, the kind people rent for weddings. I walked forward slowly, my boots crunching on the gravel, my heart beating faster with every step. Maybe they went all out. Maybe they really did this for me. Then I saw the banner. It was silk. Thick, expensive silk, stretched perfectly between two trees and lit by a spotlight. I read the words once, then again, then a third time, as if they might rearrange themselves if I stared long enough. "Congratulations, Lily and Nathan." The air left my lungs. My hands went cold. My ears rang. Lily and Nathan, my younger sister, her boyfriend. My surprise wasn't a celebration. It wasn't even an afterthought. I was standing at my sister's engagement party. I didn't move. I couldn't. The years I had spent bent over textbooks, the nights I cried alone in my apartment, the debt, the fear, it all collapsed into that single banner. "Avery, you're here!" My mother's voice snapped me back into my body. Marilyn Collins walked toward me with a practiced smile, flawless hair, a navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She didn't hug me. She never does. Her eyes flicked over me instead, assessing. "You look tired," she said. Then, without waiting for my response, she turned her head toward the tent. "We're running low on ice at the bar by the water. Go grab another bag from the freezer, will you?" I stared at her. I had just passed the hardest professional exam of my life, and the first thing my mother asked me to do was carry ice. Before I could speak, laughter rippled through the crowd, and Lily appeared. She looked radiant, effortlessly perfect. Her champagne-colored dress hugged her like it had been made for her alone. Her arm was linked through Nathan's, and on her left hand was the ring. A massive diamond, catching the light, blinding in its brilliance. I didn't see a symbol of love. I saw tuition payments. I saw rent. I saw freedom. Everything I had worked for crystallized on her finger. "Avery!" Lily squealed, kissing the air near my cheek. "I'm so glad you could pull yourself away from your books." Books. Years of my life reduced to a joke. Behind her, my father lifted a glass, laughing with men in tailored suits. I heard him say it clearly, casually, like it was nothing. "This marriage," he said, "it's our family's way out." That was the moment something inside me broke. And I knew. This night was not about love. It was about survival, just not mine. I moved through the party like someone who didn't belong to their own body. Everywhere I turned, there were smiles meant for other people. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly near the bar. The jazz music drifted across the lawn, smooth and expensive, the kind that makes people feel important just for listening to it. No one asked how the exam went. No one said congratulations. Not a single person mentioned the California bar, even though it had consumed my entire existence for years. My mother found me again near the kitchen doors. "Avery," she said, her voice low and tight, the way it always was when she wanted obedience without a scene. "The smaller bar by the water is out of ice. Guests are waiting." I looked at her, really looked this time. Her eyes slid past my face, already focused on the crowd behind me, calculating, managing, controlling. There was no pause, no question, no acknowledgement of who I was or what I had just accomplished. I just got here," I said quietly. "And?" she replied, as if my words were an inconvenience. "Lily has guests to entertain. Don't make this difficult." So I went. I carried bags of ice across the lawn, while people in tailored suits stepped aside without noticing me. The cold seeped through the plastic and burned my fingers. My blazer felt suddenly ridiculous, like a costume I had worn to the wrong play. As I poured ice into silver buckets, someone handed me an empty glass without even looking up. "Thanks," he said, already turning away. That was the moment it settled in my chest. Tonight, I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a lawyer. I was labor. Lily appeared just as the sun dipped lower, the light catching on her dress and making her glow. She knew exactly where to stand. She always did. Nathan's arm rested possessively around her waist, his watch flashing every time he moved. When Lily lifted her left hand to brush hair from her face, the diamond caught the light and scattered it like a warning. She leaned toward me, her voice sweet enough to rot teeth. "You look exhausted," she said. "Law school really took everything out of you, huh? All those years buried in books. Years. Not work, not discipline, not sacrifice. Books." I smiled, because that's what I'd been trained to do. Smile and absorb. Smile and stay quiet. Nathan nodded politely, his attention already drifting elsewhere. Lily kissed my cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick, then turned back toward the crowd, where people were waiting to admire her ring, her future, her life. When my mother tapped the microphone later that evening, the chatter softened into expectant silence. She stood tall, radiant, every inch the proud hostess. I waited. I don't know why I waited, but I did. Some irrational part of me believed she might surprise me after all. She spoke about Lily's generosity, Lily's heart, Lily's bright future. She spoke about Nathan and the opportunities ahead, about family, about new beginnings. She spoke for nearly 5 minutes. My name was never said. Not once. I stood at the edge of the tent, my hands wrapped around a glass I hadn't realized I'd picked up, and felt something inside me tilt. It wasn't anger yet. It was clarity. Sharp and sudden. I wasn't overlooked by accident. I was excluded by design. For as long as I could remember, I had been the reliable one, the stable one, the daughter who didn't need attention because she could survive without it. Lily shined. I endured. That balance had always suited them. When the applause ended, my father clapped the loudest. He looked relieved. Happy even. As if something heavy had been lifted from his shoulders. I watched him move through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing, selling a story I was only beginning to understand. I didn't cry. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't leave. Instead, I listened. I noticed the way conversation stopped when I approached, the way my parents kept glancing toward Nathan, measuring reactions. I noticed how often money came up, wrapped in jokes and half sentences. I noticed how carefully everything was being staged. Silence, I realized, wasn't weakness. It was space. And in that space, something new began to form. Not grief, not resentment, awareness. By the time the night cooled, and the lights glowed brighter against the dark, I wasn't asking myself why they didn't celebrate me anymore. I was asking myself what they were so desperate to hide. The words reached me by accident, which was how truths in my family always surfaced. My father was standing near the edge of the patio, a drink in his his voice relaxed in a way it rarely was at home. I wasn't meant to hear him. I was walking past with empty glasses, my attention elsewhere, when he leaned closer to one of Nathan's uncles and said it, almost proudly. "This marriage," he said, lowering his voice just enough to sound important. "It's our financial way out." He smiled when he said it. I kept walking, my hands steady, even as something inside me went completely still. A way out, not a beginning, not love. An exit. The question formed instantly, sharp and unavoidable. Out of what? The party around me blurred into background noise. I started paying attention differently. I watched the way my parents hovered near Nathan's family, the way every conversation seemed to orbit money without naming it directly. I noticed how carefully the event had been constructed, how nothing about it suggested restraint. This wasn't optimism. It was desperation dressed up as celebration. And desperation always leaves a paper trail. Later that night, when the guests began drifting toward the fire pit and the music softened, I slipped inside the house. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something older, something unchanged. My parents' house had always been immaculate in the ways that mattered to appearances. I stopped outside my father's study. For a moment, I hesitated. Not because I thought I was wrong, but because part of me still wanted to be. Then I remembered the day I'd asked about the trust. The educational trust my grandmother had left behind. The one she'd made painfully clear was for learning, growth, independence. Lily and I had been named equal beneficiaries. When I was accepted into law school, I had asked for help. Not everything, just enough to breathe. "We can't," my mother had said back then. "Lily will need it more for her future." That memory settled my hand on the doorknob. The study door wasn't locked. It never was. My father trusted that no one would look. I turned on the desk lamp and opened the filing cabinet, my pulse slow, methodical. This was what years of training had done to me. When things got heavy, my mind became precise. It didn't take long. Bank statements sat in neat folders, labeled with dates that stretched back months. Transfers from the trust account, not to a school, not to tuition services, to my parents' personal account. Again and again. My throat tightened as I flipped through the pages. Amounts varied, but the total climbed fast. 5,000, 8,000, 12, and then the invoice. An event planning company, premium package, outdoor setup, live music, lighting, staffing, the exact cost of the engagement party unfolding outside. Over $30,000. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking under me, and stared at the numbers until they stopped swimming. This wasn't borrowing. This wasn't confusion. This was misappropriation. A breach of fiduciary duty so clean it almost felt textbook. Then I opened my father's laptop. I didn't plan to. I didn't need to. But something pulled at me, an instinct I had learned to trust. The screen lit up immediately. No password. I clicked on the email icon, intending only to confirm dates. What I found instead made my chest burn. An email thread with my name in the subject line. My name. Messages forwarded from my personal account. My interview invitation. My offer. A law firm in San Francisco. Prestigious. Competitive. A signing bonus that would erase my credit card debt in one stroke. My father had read all of it. I leaned back, the room suddenly too small. They knew I was about to be independent. They knew my leverage was coming. And still, they had gone ahead and drained the trust. Still, they had treated me like someone who would never push back. That realization hurt more than the money. I closed the laptop carefully and replaced every document exactly as I'd found it. When I turned off the lamp, my reflection stared back at me in the dark window. I barely recognized myself. This wasn't neglect. It wasn't favoritism. It was something colder. It was a crime committed quietly, under the assumption that I would never name it. When I stepped back outside, the night air felt different against my skin. The music played on. Laughter rose and fell. No one noticed the shift that had just occurred. But I did. Because in that moment, I stopped being the daughter who waited to be valued. I became the person who understood exactly what had been taken, and exactly what the law allowed me to do about it. They called it a dinner for healing. That was the phrase my mother used when she asked me to sit at the table that night, her voice careful, rehearsed, as if the word itself might soften what she was really asking of me. The dining room had been reset for the occasion. Candles, linen napkins, The good plates we only used when appearances mattered more than comfort. Lily sat across from me, her posture perfect, her ring catching the light with every small movement of her hand. Nathan was beside her, polite, observant, clearly unsure why he'd been included in what was supposed to be a family conversation. My father poured wine as though this were any other evening, his movements steady, his face unreadable. My mother spoke first. "We don't want tension," she said, folding her hands together. "This weekend should be about unity, about moving forward." She looked at me then, directly. "Avery, you've always been the mature one. It would mean a lot if you apologized to Lily, just to clear the air." Apologized. For existing, for noticing, for not disappearing quietly enough. Lily lowered her eyes, performing humility with impressive precision. "I never meant to hurt you," she said softly. "If you felt overshadowed, I'm sorry. But this is my moment." My father cleared his throat. "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." That was when my mother leaned in, her voice dropping. "You're at the beginning of your career," she said. "Nathan's family has influence, connections. You don't want to be known as difficult before you've even started." The threat wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It sat on the table between us, heavy and unmistakable. For a few seconds, no one spoke. I felt the familiar pressure rising, the instinct to swallow everything and keep the peace. That instinct had guided me my entire life. Then, I placed my napkin down and looked up. "I'm not apologizing," I said calmly, "but I am going to explain what's actually happening." My father frowned. "Avery, this isn't the time." "It is," I replied. My voice surprised even me. It didn't shake. "Because this stops tonight." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Thick, organized, impossible to dismiss. I laid it on the table and slid copies toward each of them. "These are bank statements from the Educational Trust," I said, meeting my father's eyes. "These are transfers made to your personal account. These are invoices from the event company that planned the engagement party." My mother's face drained of color. Lily stared at the papers, confusion giving way to panic. "What is this?" she asked. "It's $32,000, I answered. "Taken from a trust you were never allowed to use this way." My father pushed his chair back slightly. "You don't understand." "I do," I said. "Completely." I turned the next page. "This is the forwarding log from my email account, and this is my employment offer from a firm in San Francisco, with a signing bonus." Nathan's attention sharpened. He leaned forward, reading. "You accessed my private correspondence," I continued. "You used knowledge of my upcoming income to justify taking money that wasn't yours." The room went silent, except for the soft crackle of the candle wicks. "This isn't a family disagreement," I said. "It's a breach of fiduciary duty." My mother reached for my arm. "Avery, please, we can talk about this privately." "No," I said, gently pulling away. "We're doing this transparently, for once." I looked at all of them before speaking again. "You have 7 days to return every dollar taken from that trust. If you don't, I will file a civil complaint for misappropriation and seek damages." Lily laughed weakly. "You wouldn't." "I will," I said, "and I'll win." That was when my father made the mistake. "We just needed time," he said, frustration breaking through his composure. "Once the wedding funds clear, we'll settle it." Nathan's head snapped up. "Wedding funds?" The silence that followed was different, sharper. "You plan to use my family's money," Nathan said slowly, "to cover this?" My father hesitated. "Too long." Nathan stood, placing his napkin on the table with deliberate care. "That's not what I agreed to." Lily reached for him. "Nathan, please." He stepped back. "I'm not marrying into a situation built on deception." He looked at me then, not with suspicion, but with something like respect. "The wedding doesn't move forward," he said, his voice steady, "until the money is returned. Fully. Documented." No one argued, because for the first time that night, the truth had weight, and it was no longer mine to carry alone. The paperwork was signed 2 mornings later, not in a courtroom, not with raised voices, but at the long dining table overlooking the bay. The ocean was calm that day, almost indifferent, as if it had already moved on from everything that had happened inside that house. My mother's hand trembled when she picked up the pen. She didn't look at me. She didn't apologize. She asked the attorney one final question about deadlines, about wire transfers, about what would happen if the funds weren't returned on time. When she signed her name, it was careful and slow, as though she were hoping the act itself might somehow soften what it meant. It didn't. The agreement was clear. Every dollar taken from the trust would be returned within the legal window. There were no conditions, no negotiations left, just compliance. Lily sat at the far end of the table, her shoulders stiff, her face pale. The ring was still on her finger, but it no longer looked like a promise. It looked like a liability. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She stared at the surface of the table as if avoiding eye contact might keep her future intact. Nathan didn't come back. I learned that from my father, who mentioned it later in passing, his voice flat, stripped of the confidence I'd grown up hearing. The wedding plans were on hold. The family friends stopped calling. The house felt suddenly too large, its luxury hollow without the audience it had been built to impress. No one asked me to stay. That was the final clarity. Once the crisis passed, once the damage was contained, there was nothing left they needed from me. I packed that afternoon, not dramatically, not angrily. I folded my clothes, boxed my books, and carried everything to my car, while the house stayed quiet behind me. My mother stood in the doorway at one point, watching without speaking. I didn't wait for her to say something meaningful. I had waited long enough. When I pulled away from the driveway, the ocean disappeared in my rearview mirror, and I felt lighter than I had in years. San Francisco greeted me with noise, movement, and the kind of anonymity that feels like freedom. My new apartment was smaller than my parents' guest room, but every inch of it belonged to me. On my first morning at the firm, I stood outside the glass building downtown, coffee warming my hands, watching people rush past with purpose. I wasn't invisible here. The work was demanding, the hours long, but the respect was immediate. My opinions were asked for. My name was used. When I signed my first set of documents as an associate attorney, I felt something settle inside me, steady and real. There were moments late at night when the weight of everything tried to return. The loss of a family, even a broken one, doesn't vanish cleanly, but it no longer defined me. What I learned wasn't how to win. It was how to stop sacrificing myself for people who confused silence with loyalty. Justice, I realized, isn't about punishment. It's about boundaries that finally hold. I didn't rebuild my life by destroying theirs. I rebuilt it by walking away with my dignity intact. And that was enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you stayed with me from the beginning to the end, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please leave a comment, and if this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can hear more stories like this.